All right, let me let some people in. Tom, Steve, Cyrus, Bob, you're coming in. Now we just got to get Mr. Let's get. There we go. Hello, everybody. Just got to wait for. Cyrus, I'm not even first of all, welcome back to the show. I love it when a guest comes back and I snare them back into my web, like Tom Morris. And we'll just wait for John Battelle. Let's see if the digital OG can figure out how to master Bitly and Zoom.
Joseph, I've been lurking almost daily, but this was a great show and a guest I am looking forward to chatting with. And good to see some of the former after show folks from my episode here.
Lurking is good. Lurking accomplishes a lot with this show.
Lurking is great. Here is John, and I think everything is recording.
There he is. Hey, John. You're muted. John's muted. Unmute John so he can talk to us.
Maybe he wants to be muted.
I'm unmuted. Sorry. Yeah, I'm new to this shit, right? I've only done it like 15 times a day for 120 days.
Still, you're right.
Yeah.
All right, who wants to kick things off?
I'm leaning back instead of leaning forward now. I hope that's okay.
That's good.
I'm leaning forward for some reason.
Hey, was it Cyrus? Was it you who made the comment about bloggers being the source of all the trouble?
Well, it was. And hi, John. It's been several years. I haven't seen you since our conference room meeting in San Francisco by the wharf, which feels like 2 decades ago.
Oh my God, it does.
I was really intrigued with your comments about blogging. I've been reflecting on this, and not to belabor the point, but I was reflecting on our days at Slate back in the late 90s. And, you know, you probably remember Today's Papers and Mickey Kels. And, you know, the comment I was making was we had writers that, like Scott Sugar was working from Hawaii and reading the morning papers, but he had to get it out before the East Coast woke up. Yep. And he was harping on Michael Kinsley, you got to give me the keys to the kingdom. I have to have access to the CMS.
Yep.
Or else we're going to miss a day part.
That's right.
And, you know, looking back on those days, it was really about the efficiency and speed of publishing. But why shouldn't everybody have that? I mean, Kinsley shouldn't be the arbiter of information. That's the evolution you were describing. But
yeah,
my reaction to your comment was, I don't think we fully appreciated at the time the implications of those actions by just freeing communication for everyone, which really is democratic and liberating, but look where it got us.
Right.
Well, you know, I do have a thought on that. You know, there was this golden moment, and one of the books I never wrote because I thought it would just be too nostalgic and unimportant, but in and of itself, kind of maybe a chapter in another book, that there was this golden moment in blogging where I'd say maybe 5 or 6 years into sort of its full, you know, I would say blogging had about a 10-year run, right? And there was a moment, 05, 06 maybe, 06, 07 maybe, where there was a perfect sort of union between Google's algorithms, the number of actually smart, principled, and interesting bloggers, and audience. All 3 of those things came together, and if you were engaged in the blogging world or new to it, you could find 10 to 15 really interesting voices who were your own kind of Michael Kinsley, right? Like you could build your kind of, you know, RSS feed or your blog roll or whatever you called it and check in every day. I did it. I did it for years, where I would check, you know, did Ohm have something new to say? Did, you know, did Cory Doctorow have something new to say? Did, you know, Doc Searles have something new to say, right? And tools were built usually open source, that actually I didn't have to go look. It just showed up in, this beautiful little formatted feed reader. Remember Dick Costolo and FeedBurner? I mean, he went on to be the CEO of Twitter, but he had this great tool, FeedBurner, and there was a moment when we actually had it both ways. We weren't listening to the cacophony of every asshole with a microphone, right? And we weren't only listening to Michael Kinsley, right? We had both. We could be our own gatekeepers of the gatekeepers, but there still were gatekeepers, right? If people wanted to know about like joints after midnight thinking about the impact of search, they read me, right? If people wanted to know about, how is Google's latest update gonna impact my SEO business, they read Danny Sullivan, right? And if they cared about the whole industry, they read both of us, right? And so there was a point in time where, voices edited themselves to the point where they got big and popular, and Google noticed them and rewarded them by being the answer to the Google search. Like, what's Google's IPO strategy? My blog posts were like 5 out of the 10 for that, in 2003, 2004. Where do you get that now? I honestly don't fucking know, right? Because, like I made that point during the show, like all of that has been colonized by push capitalism. And to get you onto that platform. I bet if you made that search now, it would be, Google tried to get you to Google Finance, or, there'd just be a bunch of junk bullshit, that was all like trying to get you to complete a down funnel action, right? Using search as a way to get there. But there was that kind of brilliant moment that where it all seemed to work. And I think we've definitely strayed from there, but I don't think that means that we can't get back. And when I talked at the end about the recount, I really do, the job we're trying to do here is to build a brand that actually has enough hard shell around it that it can live in the toxic ecosystem that is Twitter, Facebook, Snap. These places are hard on media and they're hard on truth, right? So how do you build a brand that means you can trust us and we will bring interesting conversations to you inside these platforms? It's not easy, but we're making a go of it.
Are you muted? You're muted. Joseph, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted. Joseph.
Still muted.
Still muted.
Oh, you know what? I'm muted. We can
hear you now.
I muted the old Yeti, and then I muted Zoom. Anyway, I'm making all these. I'm intimidated. I'm intimidated around John Battelle, which is why I'm making all these rookie mistakes with sound and muting. And hey. I thought for a second, by the way, in the show that I needed to click a box, and then I'm like, yeah, people will tell me if it's muted. And then suddenly it was like, no sound, no sound, no sound. I'm like, shit. Sorry, Tom, go for it.
You're the master of muting today. You're like my wife, who mutes me in multiple ways all the time. In this discussion, I mean, when Cyrus's his chat comment first came up about bloggers being a source of a lot of trouble, it reminded me of a concept that's gotten so much currency in this administration by its absence, that of vetting, the importance of vetting for. It's funny, we tend to have those of us who love free speech and democracy and all that. The idea of a gatekeeper can seem to be a negative idea. But in the academic world, where I lived for a lot of years, there were so many layers of vetting. You know, the fact that I went to UNC Chapel Hill, and then I went to Yale, and I got 2 PhDs, and I taught at Notre Dame, and then I got promoted and promoted and promoted. And then to get articles in journals, you had to be read by 3 really scary colleagues who were doing their best to shoot holes in everything you said. And there's just so many layers of vetting, so that once something gets out there in public, you know it's worth your attention.
That's right.
And especially in the journals, were the top journals, right?
Well,
and so if we had something culturally that would reflect that kind of layers of vetting, that was honest, that was expertise driven, because these bloggers, you know, anybody of course can blog and publish with no vetting, no expertise, no standing, no community of critique or certification. And that becomes a real problem, as we're seeing.
Well, it is, because I think as consumers, all of us are used to very quickly absorbing some information that comes at us, and presuming that because that information might be wearing the clothing of, you know, traditionally vetted media, that it's vetted, but it's not. And that's, you know, when you say any given, or Cyrus, and you know, you say any given blogger could say whatever, they are not, number one, and they're not just individuals expressing, you know, a libertarian philosophy,
Right.
you know, which I am, you know, sympathetic to, if not entirely embracing of, but I am sympathetic to it. It is malicious fucking actors,
Right.
who say, okay, if I just, and by the way, on both sides, you know, there are bullshit publications on the left trying to inject this stuff into the bloodstream, and there are malicious actors on the right. It turns out there's a lot more on the right, but that's only because, you know, the right has felt basically in the minority for so long as it relates to the vetting process. One of the things that Trump in particular has benefited from is his, you know, decrying of experts. These experts, these liberal, you know, university professors and their bullshit, you know, who's to say they're the right ones, you know, and these scientists with their claims that climate change is real, you know, like that we have had a culture for, you know, since the beginning of the United States that was built on Enlightenment principles, and the Enlightenment principles are built on the scientific method. And the scientific method is built on scholarship. And like, we are a scholarship built society, which means absolutely that if you have not participated beneficially in that society, that you're suspicious of it. And Trump masterfully embraced that. And
he's got all the instincts for it.
Yeah, and he is the world's greatest troll.
He is. He really is
masterful. He's the only thing he's good at, as far as I can tell, is being.
You know, John, what's interesting to me, you mentioned the country's founding on Enlightenment principles, and a lot of people don't really reflect on this. Like Adam Smith, I've mentioned on this after show before, as a philosopher, Adam Smith wrote a book about virtue a few years before he wrote The Wealth of Nations. And I see a lot of assumptions he's making in The Wealth of Nations about what we call the invisible hand, but hardly occurred there, that it's based in some assumptions about virtuous actors. Likewise, the founders of our country made certain assumptions based in philosophers like John Locke and John Stuart Mill, who believed that there should be a clash of opinions in a democracy, but sincerely held opinions that are aiming to the good, like you mentioned about libertarianism. Sure, you know, there was a time in this country where there were genuine debates between liberal philosophy and conservative philosophy, and that was all to the good, you know, because like, what are our founding values? What are our basic values? And then how do we embody those values in policy? But you're right, we're seeing none of that now. No, it's just all underhanded skullduggery, and people, it's like the rioters who break the windows. Everybody's breaking windows and not trying to build anything positive at this stage.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, this is a big problem, and it's certainly not one that, you know, that I feel like, you know, our little brand's going to solve, but I think we can point towards a way. And
so important.
It really is, and I'm I'm just absolutely dismayed at the state of political dialogue. And Joseph mentioned in the show that I'm not particularly interested in politics, which is weird for someone running a political media company to say. But I am interested in the dynamics of power and the philosophy underpinning them, right?
Right.
And I really don't, you know, I think we need some pretty fundamental changes in the business models of the media ecosystem, which includes the Googles and Facebooks and Amazons of the world, if we're going to have.
And the mainstream media has been way too afraid to call bullshit. They've tried to be so judgment-free in reporting as an effort toward fairness,
Right.
that they haven't pointed to the most obvious elephants in the room. Good mascot here, but yeah, I think what you're doing is so important, to curate this stuff, to comment on it, and to call bullshit. That's so important, because, you know, again, there are two versions of language. There are two views of language. In one view, it's linked to truth. In the other view, it's linked to power. And we've seen a shift in political language in our time, more and more thoroughly to that view that just relates language to power, with very little concern for truth. And that's very damaging and dangerous.
It's intensely damaging. And for me, what's really interesting in this journey is I'm a writer. I'm a writer and an editor, always have been. And when John came to me and said, hey man, let's try to do this thing with video, I was like, okay, I'm going to be out of my depth. And he's like, and let's start with politics. I'm like, I'm doubly out of my depth, you know? But that was actually two reasons why I did it, because I wanted to understand video better. And one of the things I've learned about video as consumed now, as it relates to the conversation of power and politics, is that video is a hot medium, using McLuhan's scale. It's super hot. People respond to it emotionally. They do not respond to it intellectually. People respond to text in a cool way. Text is a cool medium. Podcasting is a cool medium. But video and social are hot. And what we're doing is video in social, which is hot, right? And so how do you try to have a dialogue that embraces the cool but leverages the hot, right? That's what we're trying to do, is use the medium to jar people into thinking a bit differently about all of this. And people say we're very liberal, and I hate being sort of turned that way. We're the party of truth, Right. We call bullshit on anybody. It just turns out that the people in charge right now are conservative and lie like more than ever in the history of an administration. These guys lie. But our biggest video was about Joe Biden, and we were calling bullshit on some response he did as it related to one of the shootings. And so, it doesn't really matter from our point of view. It's like, who's in power and what bullshit are they peddling? And how do we figure out a way? And by the way, we do that with Mark Zuckerberg. We do it with Nick Clegg. We'll do it with, Jeff Bezos. We'll do it with, Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan Chase. It doesn't matter. Yeah. And it's, it's going to be fun when we start expanding, which is starting really next quarter, into these other areas. I think people are going to be like, oh yeah, what the recount does over here, they're doing over there too. And I think that's going to really change the view of what we are. And I'm looking forward to that.
Certainly the more at bats you get, the more the more expansive the body of work becomes. And anyone who points a finger and says, you're overly harsh on Trump, you'd be like, because he's a troll and acting like a moron. We weren't. I mean, and then what your counterbalance is probably not a massive fan of Nancy Pelosi getting her hair going to get her hair done and not wearing a mask. And that's the beauty of, if you're an advocate for truth, as long as you pursue it and don't compromise.
It's Socratic. It's exactly what Socrates did, right? He called bullshit on everybody. Now, it didn't turn out that well for him, but we can hope for better in our time.
So
right?
Tom, before I call,
I apologize. I've got to duck out here in 5 minutes for a meeting. Could I throw a topic to the group?
You as long as you don't throw it out and then leave.
No. I'll make it quick. John and this conversation have talked a lot about the content, but I hope that at some point we can look at the data that's being extracted from the consumption and how that data is being used to further create the problems, because it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy. As you send those signals, foreign actors are creating graph databases on how Americans are consuming information. I think people are looking at the TikTok ban a little bit incorrectly, and how the data from that consumption plays into a broader nation state.
I agree.
Soft war. So anyway, that was my little comment.
Yeah, that's an easy one for John to answer in 4 minutes and 38 seconds.
And good to see you again. Chat soon. I'm looking forward to John's response.
Yeah, take care. No, that piece is the subject of my research at Columbia, actually. So I have a relationship with Columbia. I have since I moved to New York, and I do research in how data flows through society. And my initial research focused on the terms and service and privacy policies of the big four data, vacuum companies: Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook. And I'm deeply interested in all of that. And I'm also on the board of several data-related companies. And so it's an area that I think if we want to unlock the problems that we've been discussing for the past hour and a half, we have to look at how we govern data flows. It is the underpinning of everything. And if you wanted to solve the ills of the modern America in the post-war era, you have to look at how you regulate the petroleum economy. You just have to, because it drove everything. It drove highway, building and suburban flight and race relations and everything else. It was driven by this cheap oil and our approach to, our geopolitics around making sure that we ensured we had access to that cheap oil. If you didn't look there, all the ills of American society, ladder to some pretty fundamental things about the most important commodity driving our economy. The most important commodity driving our economy right now is fucking data. So if we don't think about it that way, we are losing our way. And that's why I attached to Columbia to study that stuff.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Have a good one, everybody.
Nice to see you, Cyrus. All right. I two quick questions in the time we have, and if anyone wants to just jump in the final few minutes with a question or comment. First of all, Tom Morris, you need your notes, please.
Oh, my notes. Yeah, I'm always, here are my notes for today. They go and they go and they go, and I'll put them on Facebook and LinkedIn later, because you really stimulated me today, John, and you too, Joseph. I just all kinds of ideas.
All right, thank you. And John, just a quick question for you. Why the name? I mean, obviously, the recount. I think back to Florida, but I'm sure there's something more profound than that.
No, yeah, we took a bunch of mushrooms and realized there would be a recount in 2020.
You didn't need to take mushrooms for that.
Right, exactly. We were looking for a brand worthy name, and we knew that one of the things we would be doing would be to recount the day's news, right? To recount the day's news.
Recount, okay.
And I've always been a fan of entendre, industry standard, right? And so we also wanted the brand to reflect the initial space we were going to live in, which was politics. So recount, made sense. And we like the tagline, which we haven't yet used, but we probably will soon, of demanding a recount, demand the recount, right? That sounded like something we might use at some point. And so it just sort of stuck with us, because we thought, it sort of says politics and power, and it also has the entendre of being about recounting the day's news.
That's nice. Okay, one more from me, just as we wind down and go back into our introspection, which is, who was on the cover, or what was on the cover of the first Wired behind you?
So that's the science fiction author Bruce Sterling. And we, one of the things that we did when we were reinventing that medium, which I think we got we got our first National Magazine Award for design the year we came out. We were redesigning what a magazine was, and one of the things that was really hard to do in the early 90s was, if you're covering digital technology and you're covering it like it was a massive society scale story as opposed to speeds and feeds and boxes, you didn't want to put like a computer on the cover. You didn't want to put like technology on the cover. It's not particularly cover worthy. So we made the decision to put people on the cover that were heroes of the core culture that was driving the change. And in this case, Bruce Sterling, not only was a hero of ours as a science fiction writer, but we sent him off to write our cover story, which was to go inside the Pentagon and find out how they were preparing for cyber war. And so this photo, that photo the first time, I hated it. I'm like, this is an out of focus picture of the top of a guy's head. But I think it's actually lasted and gotten more interesting over time.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so we got about 3 minutes left, and then I'm going to stick to my 30-minute limit. Does anyone else want to just jump in as we wind down? I've also learned how to appreciate the power of silence.
Yeah, me too. Especially when I've been talking so much for so long.
I think Farnham has a.
I was just going to say.
You know what? I just found out I have a 3:30 meeting, and my assistant is yelling at me and saying I should get on it.
Farnham, can you do it in 10 seconds?
Yeah, in 10 seconds, John. What a great show, and I really appreciate your insights today. Fascinating, and I actually look forward to watching it again. And I will invite you to come to other after shows, because there are other smart people that show up who didn't show up today, and we'd love to have you part of that crew. So hope you'll come back.
Yeah,
Thank
really. You're doing interesting stuff. I mean, and important stuff too. So we really want to let you know how much people like us appreciate what you're shooting for now.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed it all, and appreciate the support, and I'll see you here another time.
Yeah, thank you, John.
All right. Take care, guys.
Take care. All right. I'm going to